Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's Lexer webinar. My name is Aaron Lombardi. I'm VP of Retail at Lexer. Before we begin, I'd just like to thank our friends at Outdoor Retailer for helping us to put on today's event. Now, many of you we've met at past Outdoor Retailer events in Denver, and we're really sorry we can't see you in person, but we are delighted to have you with us virtually. I'd like to introduce David Chinn, who is our president and CMO. David is going to take us through examples of how some of our customers, Black Diamond, Mountain Khakis, Rip Curl, and Spider, leverage Lexer's CDP to drive some significant results for their business. So David's content will last about half an hour, and then we will save time for questions at the end. So if you do have questions, please feel free to submit them. The questions are anonymous, so we encourage that. And with that, I will pass it over to David.
Thanks, Aaron. Thank you, everybody, for joining. So just for a quick introduction to Lexa, we are both a software and services business, and we center on helping outdoors brands to really genuinely understand and engage their customers. Now, what I would say that, in today's current marketplace, never has there been a greater focus on, genuinely understanding your customers. The pace of change is just shockingly fast. And I'm sure everybody has seen this chart from McKinsey, whereby in the first 90 days of COVID, we saw e-commerce penetration in the US move 10 years forward in just the first 3 months. Now, one of the things that we're observing is that, leading brands are adapting their kind of approach to customer data and their data infrastructure to help adapt to this type of rapid change. And what we're seeing is that these brands are really focused on bringing together all of their sources of customer data, from orders to product to engagement on the website, customer service and email, their customer surveys, making sure that all of those data sets are in one single place to get that single view of customer, and then are focusing on, customer enrichment and predictive analytics to ultimately drive insight into customers, to identify opportunities and change that then result in meaningful customer segmentation that you can easily activate across paid and owned media channels so you can speak to your customers in a more relevant way. Now, today we're going to cover 4 practical examples for you. Our focus today is not to give you a vendor sales pitch, just to be really clear. We really want to focus on how customers are implementing strategies using their data that help influence each stage of the customer lifecycle. Our goal here is that you leave this session with a few ideas and tips that you can implement, and hopefully implement quite quickly ahead of the holidays to make a really positive impact to this critical trading window. So the first example we're going to start with is for Spider, and it speaks to how they approach prospecting. So, there's one kind of tip that we want to make really clear today around how you think about prospecting and customer acquisition. And it centers on this idea that in modern D2C businesses, that the top 20% of your customers will end up making the majority of your sales and profit. And so this is that 20-80 rule, the Pareto Distribution, and it plays out time and time again. So we've got more than 100 customers. We look across those 100 customers, and what we see is that, their top 20% of customers will make up typically between 50 to 90% of total sales and profit. In the case of Spider, there were 20-81. But when we looked at even the top 5% of Spider's customers, they made up 2/3 of total sales. And so what's really interesting here is not that this small group of customers are really valuable. It's that there's a very large group of customers. In Spider's case, 80% of their customers only made up 19% of their sales. And the reason that this is so important is as we focus on prospecting and acquisition activities, we need to be really focused that we're going to find customers that look like the top 20%. And the impact when you do that is really quite transformational to customer growth and lifetime value. So seeing that Spider had quite a prominent skew in customers and revenue, the next thing we were focused on is helping them understand the profile of these top 20% of customers. And so the next practical tip is around persona segmentation. And, what one message we're really keen to land today is, persona segments don't have to be complex. All too often we see brands trying to make their persona segmentation very, very, very granular, super detailed, and really comprehensive. Typically, those persona segmentation might involve research panels, external agencies. They have lots of qualitative data in them. But if you can't link your persona segment to each customer in your database, it's really hard to use them for personalization and targeting. And so we advocate for anyone starting with persona segmentation, start really simple. And so one of the things that we did for Spider is by looking at their top 20% of customers, the first thing we asked is, what products are these customers buying? And so you can see on the left there's a family group. Now, we identified the family group with one single variable, and it's that they had purchased children's wear. And so if you can find pieces of information that get you towards buying motivation, it's incredibly powerful for prospecting and acquisition and personalization. And so these family customers, when we segmented them out and looked at them, the reason they were high value is because of frequency of repurchase, and they had large baskets. And for anyone with children, I'm sure, young kids, either a 9-year-old and an 8-year-old, they're growing so fast that the ski outfit I buy them this season is not going to fit them next season. And so if we're an avid skiing family, we're coming back again, time and time again, to buy the latest outfit for the children as they outgrow their existing outfits. And that's what makes them such high value customers. So with the family segment well defined, we then took everyone that wasn't in that segment and looked at what they were purchasing. And what we identified was a really clear split between the remaining customers. There were some customers that had purchased frequently. They tended to buy mid to kind of low price items. They had relatively small baskets, so they were buying one item at a time traditionally, but they came back and repeat purchase frequently. Whereas the other group had, most of them were one-time buyers, but they had purchased a premium ski jacket or a ski jacket and pair of pants. And so we turned those into two segments and started to look at where they lived. And we saw this really interesting trend of where, the group with mid-price point frequent repurchase, the majority of those customers lived close to the mountains. Whereas the other category, the one-time buyers buying premium products, the majority of those customers lived in cities. And so we started to get this sense that potentially, the customer that buys frequently were our brand loyalist who is topping up their wardrobe, who traditionally would ski multiple times per season, driving to the snow, whereas the other category were our holiday-based skiers that would fly to the mountain. Now, the benefit of this type of simplified, persona-based segmentation is that it becomes very easy to match creative and offers once you understand the buying motivations of each segment. And so one of the things that we did is we sent these persona segments of high-value customers to Facebook. We used them to create a lookalike audience for each persona, and we targeted them with this creative. And so for the family group, we put them in the draw to win an outfit for this, like a ski outfit for the whole family. For the brand loyalist, we leaned into exclusivity. And because Spider is the sponsor of the US ski team, we were able to put together, a really compelling range of ski gear that's only available to the US ski team. And then for the affluent off-mountain category, we provided a really high-value single gift card with kind of emotive messaging around dream big, thinking of kind of invoking that holiday creativity and inspiration. So you can get a sense here of, if you understand the buying motivation of the segment, it becomes really easy to position creative and offer to the segment. Now, these campaigns that ran over a 5-month period were incredibly successful. We were able to acquire new emails to the database at between 30 cents to 90 cents per email. But the really important thing here, and this is the next kind of practical tip for anyone that's running kind of lead generation or sweepstake style campaigns, is once an individual has hit the subscribe button, you should do your best to try and direct that traffic into the product pages on your site that relate specifically to the prize or the offer. So naturally, this was very easy for the family segment. So, once they entered the competition, we'd then put them into the product pages of the children's ski gear. And when we did that, one of the things we observed is that we were successful in converting a portion of that traffic. So whilst our goal was to grow the email database, which over a 5-month period, Spider successfully grew their database by 85%, we were able to convert some of that traffic. And so for some of the campaigns, we got close to funding the media spend through conversion. Now, the impact of a bigger database was quite impactful for Spider. So we looked at their campaigns that they ran after the database had grown to the same periods of the prior year. And we could see that when they were on promotion, that they were driving 94% more revenue per email on average. And then when they were sending out their more content and lifestyle focused emails, that the revenue was up 52% to the comparative period. So the simple message here is that a larger database of qualified prospects can help you to significantly increase your email revenue. So the next thing that we want to take you through is how Mountain Khakis approached high value customer acquisition. So we've worked with Mountain Khakis now for 2 years, and we were fortunate to start working with them at a very similar time to right now. I think it was mid-October, and it was just in the lead up to Black Friday and Cyber Monday. And so one of the things Mountain Khakis was particularly focused on was maximizing this kind of holiday period to drive revenue and customer acquisition. And so leaning kind of into that same approach of high value customers, one of the things that Mountain Khakis was very keen to do was to take their high value customers and segment them into some simple groups to do testing in paid media. And so again, you really want to focus on these simplified strategies that drive learning. And so the 4 segments that Mountain Khakis used to build their lookalike audiences in paid media, the first segmentation variable was gender. And so for all those that are doing performance advertising in Facebook and Instagram for acquisition and are using their customer data for lookalikes, we'd really encourage you to bring gender into your seed audiences. Because if you're using just an audience of all customers or all your high value customers, and there's a mix of gender in those segments, I think if my wife and I have really different interests on social media, and so you make it harder for Facebook to build that lookalike when you have a mix of genders in there with really different interests. The other benefit from bringing gender into your segmentation at this stage is it makes it really easy to personalize creative to the audience. The other variable that we looked at, and this is more for testing, was recency. And so a question that Mountain Khakis had leading into this holiday period was, does a lookalike audience of my active customers perform better than one of my inactive customers? So they created this kind of break between active and inactive to create lookalikes to see if that created a difference in performance. So with those lookalike audiences segmented around gender, again, it becomes really easy to start to personalize the creative that you speak to each audience with. So they leaned into flat lays of kind of men's product versus women's product targeted at the 2 audiences. When we looked at the campaign performance year on year, the results were quite stark. And so from a customer perspective, the focus on high value audiences, the number of new customers they acquired increased by 58% compared to the year prior. And the revenue from kind of those new customers increased by 40%. We did a bunch of targeting to existing customers, and so there was really, profitable growth there. But just with the simple tactic of incorporating customer lifetime value and focusing on gender in your lookalike audiences created a really significant uplift for Mountain Khakis running into the holidays. The other great insight that came from our post-campaign analysis was understanding the gender distribution of the new customers that were being acquired comparative to the previous period. And so one of the things that we observed was that the number of female customers that we had acquired was significantly more than previous periods. And so this is as times of change are really fast, a lot of brands are seeing a significant growth in e-commerce. One of the things that we would recommend is to pay really close attention to the profile and the behaviors of your newly acquired customers and look at differences to how customers have behaved previously. When we did this, we looked at the female customers, and one of the things that we could identify is that a large proportion of the female customers were buying men's product. And so with this insight, the team at Mountain Khakis were incredibly agile. They created an audience of female customers who had purchased men's products, and they targeted them with this ad on Instagram and Facebook. The creative was fantastic. The messaging here was, you've got him squared away, now it's time to treat yourself. So identifying that these female customers had bought men's product was a really clear sign of gifting. And they were able to generate a 7 times return on ad spend in getting a second transaction out of these newly acquired customers in as little as 2 weeks. So whilst a 7 times return on ad spend is good, but not life-changing, the fact that you're getting such a profitable return on ad spend in the first 2 to 3 weeks after a customer's first transaction is really quite transformative. Okay, moving on to Rip Curl here. And Rip Curl have been very focused on growing customer lifetime value with personalized email programs. Now, prior to working with us, Rip Curl had a challenge, a really common challenge that we see. And it's that they use a number of different systems to manage their website, their email, their point of sale system, their service tools, their social media advertising. And they also have a fantastic product, which is their search GPS watch. So use it to track your surfing. Now, all of those sources of data were currently not connected. And so if you wanted to understand a customer's lifetime value, you wouldn't be able to do that because the retail and e-commerce data was not connected. If you wanted to know whether a customer engages with high-value customers engage with email, again, you wouldn't know that because the email data and the website were not connected. And so a really simple solution for that was to kind of deploy our tools and to create a unified data set. And they embedded something that they called the Rip Curl ID, which every customer has a unique ID that stitches their data together across all of their systems. And the output of this unified data structure is a actionable profile for every customer. And so this is a screenshot of a customer's profile. The customer's name is Sam. And as we look at Sam's profile, we can start to see some of that search GPS watch data coming through to the platform. So we can see, how many waves he's caught, how many surfing sessions he's had. But this data is really interesting because it provides an insight into his interests and his behaviors. And one of the reasons that, our largest customer segment by volume are outdoors and action sports brands is because you sell functional products. And so one of the simple strategies when it comes to email personalization is to build segments of customers based around the functional products they purchase. And so one of the things that Rip Curl did that was very kind of productive for them leading into the fall period, they segmented out any customers that had using the product data, any customers that had purchased wetsuits previously, and then they created segments of customers that they inferred are interested in surfing because they either had search GPS data showing that they're surfers or they had bought other functional surf products. They then targeted those customers with emails based around wetsuits. And it's literally as simple as that. So we know that you're interested in wetsuits because you've either bought wetsuits historically or you're a surfer. We can infer that you're a surfer from other products you've bought or from your watch GPS data. So we think that you'll be interested in wetsuits because the temperature's dropping. Now, these campaigns for Rip Curl, they had their global wetsuit rollout. It was their best digital product rollout ever. They sold out of many of their wetsuit key sizes in the first 3 weeks. And when they did a comparative against other campaigns running, the wetsuit campaigns delivered 93% more revenue than the other campaigns running in August. And so again, this is just a super simple but very practical example of if you build segments of customers based on the products they purchased or the interests that you can infer from their transactional behavior and serve them content that are relevant to their interests, the conversion rate increases significantly. Now, there is also a other side benefit here. The side benefit is, if you can be more targeted like this and suppress messaging to customers that might not be interested in the message, there's a lot of benefits around like messaging fatigue, improvements in your deliverability scores with ISPs. So the big thing here is just simple personalization based around interests creates massive impact. Now, our kind of final example here speaks to automated retention journeys, and it really closes out the customer lifecycle. So we've looked at prospecting, we've looked at acquisition, we've looked at growth. And so this example is for Black Diamond. And the first practical tip that we'd like to share when it comes to customer retention is to be really focused on channel addressability. And so for the vast majority of our customers, when we look at their customers that are inactive or lapsed, so maybe a year or 2 years since their last purchase, and we look at how many of those customers are opted in to receive email, the proportion drops significantly. And then when we look at the customers that are opted in for email and then say, well, how many of those customers have actually opened one of our emails in the last 6 months, there's another drop off. And those kind of two compound drops often mean that when we look at your lapsed customers, fewer than a third of those customers will be addressable via email. And so if you're using email to predominantly impact customer retention, there's a chance that you're missing out on speaking with 2/3 of your customer base. And so one of the things that we advocate here, and again, it's a really simple strategy that's very easy to deploy, is to create a segment of customers that are either haven't opened an email for 6 months, that are not opted in for email, and send them to paid media as a custom audience into Facebook and make them addressable in paid media. Now, Black Diamond deployed this strategy for their kind of 1 year lapsed customer group. And so they created an email group of customers who were opted in and had opened an email in the last 6 months. They created a segment of customers who had either opted out or not opened an email in the last 6 months and targeted them in paid media. Now, something that Black Diamond does fantastically, and I set them up as the gold standard, is the quality of their creative and copy. And so, for the lapsed audience, it's someone out, living their brand values with really relevant creative, saying, we miss you, come back. But the copy is beautiful. They're saying, it sure is lovely out here. I bet you're on an adventure, but here's an offer to welcome you back to the brand. And they mirror that same messaging in paid. Now, for Black Diamond, the results through these campaigns were particularly compelling. And, the focus of these campaigns is to automate them. So as customers get to the 365-day mark of not purchasing, the audiences for email and paid are automatically updated. These campaigns are created ready to trigger as a customer fulfills the audience requirements. After deploying these campaigns, we compared them to their previous retention activities, and we saw a really significant improvement in not only conversion rate, but revenue per email. And then the audience that we were targeting in paid social were able to drive transactions out of that audience at nearly a 4.5 times return on ad spend. So even though these customers who have not transacted with a period of time and have opted out of email, it doesn't mean that they're still not potentially engaged with your brand. I think the big message here is that email as a channel is pretty busy. And I think of myself personally, I really do associate email with work. And so there's only a very few brands that I kind of let pierce the email bubble, because I'm often, email for me is a job. I get more emails than I know how to respond to. And so I rely heavily on social for the brands that I interact with, because often when I'm in social, I'm in a really different mindset. I'm not in the work mindset. I'm in a social mindset, or a family or relaxed mindset, and I'm more open to engage. And so the simple tip here is, really consider leaning into paid media as an avenue to make your customers addressable for your retention campaigns. So that kind of brings us towards the end of the presentation. The key takeaways for everyone, and I hope that you're able to take at least one or two key learnings here. When it comes to your prospecting, focus on your high-value customers first and understand their buying motivations. Create lookalike audiences based on high-value customers where you understand their buying motivation, and personalize the offer to the things that motivate them. For your high-value customer acquisition, so for your acquisition activities, again, really lean into your high-value customers, but incorporate additional variables into those audiences. Things like gender work really well, things that help improve the quality of the lookalike, but also enable you to personalize creative. With your email programs, just start super simple. If you're currently broadcast emailing all your customers with the same messaging, start by looking at product-based segmentation and gender segmentation are really powerful, simple starting points to improve performance. And then when you get to your retention activities, make sure you're maximizing reach by speaking into paid media. So that kind of ties up the content, and we can now move on to questions.
Great. Thanks, Dave. Appreciate that. And just as a reminder to everyone, if you missed any portion of today's webinar or would like to watch it again, this will be available on demand. So just to keep that in mind. Okay, so if you do have questions, please feel free to submit them. I see we have a number of them coming in already. So Dave, I'm just going to kind of start at the top of the list here. So the first question is, how large does my business have to be to put some of these strategies in place?
Yeah, a good question. So the measurement of size, maybe database size is a nice place to start. So with the acquisition and prospecting activities, the size of an audience to create like a custom audience in Facebook has to be more than 1,000 people. And so, traditionally you might have to send 1,500 or 2,000 customer records to Facebook to make a 1,000 match. And so traditionally we'd see you start to get into the range of like value when you have 4,000 to 5,000 customers, so that you can at least pick the best 2,000 of the 5,000 and then send them to Facebook to create the lookalike. Now, you can create, I think, the one thing here is you can create really good quality lookalike audiences with just 1,000 or 1,500 customers. Facebook does a very, very good job of that.
Great. Thanks, Dave. So this is a question that centers around trends. We're coming into the holiday season, of course. So what trends do you generally find in analyzing results during the holiday season, November to December, versus the non-holiday season?
Again, another great question. So we do a lot of analysis on this with our customers when we first deploy our system. And so one of the things that we do, we create segments of customers whose acquisition date was during these holiday or promotional periods, and we compare them to customers whose first order dates were in non-promotional periods. And what I would say is that the data really varies by brand, and even varies within brands within the same categories. And so, it's quite often we see customers acquired during the holiday period. So one of the first things we look at is what's their value in their first transaction. So often we'll see that their value in their first transaction is often higher in the holiday periods because of the incentives are strong, and so people go deep and buy a lot of product. But then the other thing we look at is how their customer lifetime value grows over time. And almost always, the customers that are acquired during the holiday period have a slower customer lifetime value growth than customers acquired at normal periods. So usually they'll start at a higher lifetime value, but then maybe at the 6 to 9 month mark, you'll see your non-holiday customers overtake them in lifetime value. The other thing that we see where we look at those holiday customers is we'll see a strong retention moment happen at the 12-month mark. So they're a really seasonal shopper. They come, they buy big during the holiday period, and then they don't purchase again until the next holiday period. And so what's really important is that you know that, and that you are really, like for those group of customers, you're really intensely communicating to them during this period, because this is when they're most likely to make a repeat purchase.
Great, thanks, Dave. So the next question is related to the Mountain Khakis case study. So during that case study, we observed that there were women who were purchasing men's products. And the question is, how does Lexer exactly determine gender?
Yeah, so again, just another practical tip for everyone. I'd really encourage you in your signups to add gender as a field, because for a lot of brands that sell either if you're a men's brand only selling men's product, or a women's brand, or whether you sell men's and women's products, there is huge amounts of opportunity in understanding your female customers if they're buying men's or women's products. So there's lots of gifting, there's lots of activation use cases there. So if you're not capturing gender, we have a gender inference model that uses customers' first names to very accurately infer gender for about 65% of your database. Now, if it's a David, you have to be a pretty horrible parent to name your daughter David. But so we'll robustly predict that David is a man. But for the names like a Sam or an Alex that are quite unisex names, there's too much risk in making a prediction, so we don't for those. But we're usually able to add, about 65% of your customer base with gender.
Great. So the next question is centered around direct-to-consumer. So for the brands that you discussed today, how much of their business do you estimate is direct-to-consumer? And if I'm looking to improve direct-to-consumer, what are some tips to help me do that?
Yeah. So our customers, more broadly, range from, we have customers that are e-commerce pure plays. They've always been, digitally native brands have always been e-commerce. We have a really significant number of brands that were traditionally wholesale brands that have moved a little later to digital and to direct to consumer. And, they're benefited by having lots of brand awareness in wholesale and are starting to make that transition to e-commerce and direct to consumer. So we have quite a lot of those customers. And then we do equally, we have a mix of customers that are omni-channel and like wholesale stores and e-commerce. So what are some of the tips for, if you're a traditional wholesale brand, you need to start by identifying who are the customers that are purchasing your products. Now, the Spider was a great example of that. So, when we started working with them nearly 3 years ago, the majority of their business was in wholesale, and they were very intent on growing direct to consumer. And so activities like those really targeted sweepstakes are a great way of growing your email list and identifying potential customers that you then can convert through your email programs without having to spend too much money in paid media for conversion. But I would really start, it's about building your database and building insights into who your kind of customers are. Depending on your category, there's some opportunities to leverage tactics like product registration. So, if I maybe take this out of your category for a moment, electronics brands that are predominantly sold through other retailers have been doing this for decades. You register your product after buying it, and it's their way of identifying the end consumer who's bought the product. One of the benefits that outdoors and active sports brands have is, you can offer really rich content on how to use the product properly, how to take care and extend the life of the product. And so one of the things that we're seeing some of our customers do is place a call to action on the hang tags of products that get customers to come to your .com site to get information on the product, to register a profile so that you can send them care information or usage instructions. It's a clever strategy of building that relationship, but also adding value to the customer.
Great. So the next question is about customer data itself. So the question is, can I gather data that you were speaking about through Shopify, or do I need to purchase a CRM or some expensive tool? Or can Google Analytics help me with all of this? Help me out with all of this?
So you definitely can do some of this through the back end of Shopify. It just so happens that a lot of our customers are in Shopify. Of the majority, I'd say more than half, maybe 55-60% of our customers run Shopify. So you can do this. You can export some of these features out of Shopify, maybe into Excel as an example. You might leverage an external tool like a Tableau or something like that, but you can dump out that data into a CSV, and you can run queries over that data to do some sorting or ranking. The one big thing that I'd encourage you to do, though, is when you look at those activities that you're doing, you have to put a dollar value on your time. And so if you how long does it take you to do that? How often do you repeat the work? How much time are you investing in that? And use the time value to make a decision whether automation is valuable or not. But you definitely can get started without a customer data platform if you're just e-commerce. If you have other channels and other data sets, obviously it grows in complexity unless you're a wizard in Excel.
Great. And keeping with kind of the customer data theme, having enough data and the ability to link it with some reliability seems like the critical hurdle. How can I tell if I have that and that the investment is likely to pay off?
I think that comes back down to database size is a really nice proxy for that. And so if you've got, for the acquisition use cases, more than 5,000 customers is a starting point. But for your customer like lifecycle marketing, I don't think the number has to be as big as 5,000. So, starting to, do simple gender segmentation and personalize your emails to gender is a really good starting point for brands that, have growth aspirations, but might today have, 2,000 or 3,000 customers in your database.
Okay, so the next question is talking about social media advertising. If you're not doing a lot of social media advertising, would a CDP still be valuable?
Yes. So two lenses to this. If you're not doing a lot of social media advertising because you don't have an agency or you're new to it, a CDP can be a really good place, and the services that a vendor provides around their solution can be a really good strategy source to help you. We're actually just about to release a case study of how we helped Corbett's to run their very first customer retention and acquisition campaigns in Facebook. So our customer success team helped them set up the campaigns and provide the recommendations around audience segmentation and strategy so that they could do that, and their results were outstanding on really small media investment. So, you don't have to spend a lot to make quite a lot of impact. If you don't want to, if there's a business structural reason that you don't invest in paid media, well then, you've got to make your owned channels like email and SMS work really hard for you. And so we do have customers that just use us for email because they have an agency that has a different tooling that they pay for through the agency, and we just focus on email. But
I'm not sure I understand.
If that's the case, you've really got to make your email work hard for you.
Right. So I'm seeing a lot of questions around, will this presentation be made available after today's webinar? And the answer to that is yes. We will send you an email if you'd like a copy of this. We will provide that to you, so not to worry there. From a technical point of view, Dave, what does the onboarding process look like? How long does it take to get up and running?
So it's about a 4 to 6 week period to go live. And if you're a brand that's using, the common tool set that a lot of kind of small to medium-sized brands are using, so your Shopify's, your Klaviyo's, those types of tools, we have native connectors into we've integrated into 140 systems. So, but if you're using those tools, it's really easy. You connect your systems to our customer data platform, and then our team goes away and brings in all the data and comes back to you to present what data is available and what can be done. And that's about a 4 to 6 week period before we deliver an insights back to you and make some recommendations around what actions you can take with your data.
Great. And Dave, you just kind of touched on this, but the next question is, we have a really small team that handles marketing and e-commerce. What type of support does Lexer offer?
Well, we're not just a software company. And, I think one of the really important things to consider here is if you haven't had access to your customer data in this way, knowing exactly how to use it is challenging. And so we've built a professional services kind of edition. And so our team can go all the way from helping you operate the tools to helping you with the analysis, insights, and recommendations around marketing activation. And so we're really eager to help our customers. One, it's great for our learning, but we kind of know that when we help you, the results that you achieve are often improved.
So here's a question. I'm a startup. We're going after our first customers and have nearly no budget for marketing. What's the first best marketing step to drive awareness of our offering? Guerrilla stickers, flyers, CPC, other.
So you've got no customers, you're launching new, I would obviously lean into organic social. Your first job is to win brand advocates that generate word of mouth. And so I'd lean into influencer, brand ambassador, and strong focused on your organic social feed and strategies that get people to show interest and identify as those customers hit your page. So strategies that drive them to your .com site. And then I'd really lean into any strategy that identifies the customer pre-purchase. So you need to do all of the obvious things, which is the modal window that pops up to capture an email, that I do as much of that as possible. I would lean into some of those like sweepstakes style activities. You can, in Facebook, you can do research in their audience insights product to understand, what pages and attributes people have affinities to other sites that might be like yours. And you can use the Facebook interest attributes to create audiences to get you started before you have enough audience data to do it for yourself using your own records.
Great. And Dave, kind of keeping along the lines of recommendations and advice, the question is, what do you recommend for a B2C customer database for an e-commerce company with 1.5 million customer records and a limited tech staff? So kind of similar to the question before about a limited internal resources, but we have 1.5 million customer records. So what would we recommend for a B2C customer database of that size?
I'm not sure I understand. What would we recommend as like a technology set to operate that type of business? Or I might need a little bit more detail there for that one. That I'd say one thing I would say though is with 1.5 million records, you've got a really good base to get you can do a lot with that. So we see brands with that kind of volume of records being really productive with, maybe that's one we can take offline to answer a little bit more and make some recommendations around tech stack or systems or approach.
Yep, we'll make a note of that. Next question, regarding prospecting, have you seen consumer attitudes towards unsolicited emails change to make them viewed more or less favorably toward the sending brand over the past, say, 5 years? So consumer attitudes towards unsolicited emails, has that changed to make them viewed more or less favorably?
The consumer sentiment towards an unsolicited email is always bad. You just have to put yourself in your own shoes there. If you've acquired my email address through a list and you email me, and I'm speaking as an audience of one here, I find that quite abrasive because I'm like, who are you? How did you get my email? I don't know you. I think in the prospecting example with the sweepstakes, what you're doing is you're driving them to your website and you're opting them into your email program on their entry, and you present them with your terms and conditions. And, we need to be especially clear of that today with, the consumer privacy landscape with GDPR and now CCPA. Brands need to be very kind of proactive in the consents that you gain. And so I think that the email addresses you acquire through those sweepstakes are opted in and have consent. So, and the other thing that, just maybe a little bit more detail around those campaigns, one of the things that we advocate for is, starting to trigger some messaging to the people that enter the competition immediately after submission. So as they submit, you send them a thank you email. Hey, thank you for entering the competition. This is how many days before we draw a winner. Looking forward to informing you. Then when you successfully draw the winner, that you're sending another message to them to say, hey, congratulations, you won. Or if you didn't win, and then providing them with a reason to come back to the site. Apologies that you didn't win, but hey, when you spend $100, we'll give you 10% off on your first order. Something that drives them to the site and gives them a reason to convert. But the big thing there is that the second they submit, that you're appearing in their email inbox and kind of drawing the relevance between their interaction with your competition and their appearance in your inbox.
Great. Okay, next question. What is the diagnostic if you've been a time on the market with a high organic engage and the organic starts to decrease suddenly? So it looks like their marketing efforts are focused primarily on organic that's starting to decline. What recommendation would we offer a brand that's facing this type of scenario?
This might, in the last month, we've actually seen a decline for a number of customers in their their paid campaigns. And I think that we might see that, I don't have a definitive answer to what's causing that, but I think that maybe the current kind of political landscape that we're in is causing people just to be a bit reserved. And we're starting to see COVID hang around a bit, which could drive that. But if this example here is kind of in the organic side, one of the things that we are really advocating for is the collection of something called zero-party data. And without being too kind of geeky on the data side, the zero-party data is a flavor of your first-party data, but it's information that you collect through surveys. And the reason it's treated differently is because the customer or the prospect is actively volunteering information to you. So they're expressly communicating that to you. So one of the things I would say here is, if you're seeing a decrease in organic engagement, one of the things that you should lean into doing, I might look to see if you can find some customers who have stopped engaging with your email during the same period. Maybe you can trigger some surveys to those customers and ask them some questions about kind of lifestyle or, situational things that might provide evidence into what's driving a decrease in your organic traffic. But it is a hard one. I'd also look at your social content, see what you're doing in those organic channels to drive engagement, and see whether there's been a change in content type, use of model, locations. There's kind of a lot of stuff there that you can look at.
So we have about 10 minutes left. If you do more questions, certainly let us know. David, here's a question. A lot of our customers seem to be one-time buyers, and repeat purchase is an obstacle that my brand faces. Can you help me understand some recommendations to help me address this one-time buyer problem?
Yeah. I mean, the first thing is that you're not alone. As we look at our customers and we just create segments based on order frequency, one-time buyers is almost always the largest segment by volume. And I believe that one of the hardest things to crack as a direct-to-consumer brand is that elusive second order. We have a set of playbooks that focused on driving conversion to second order. And so one of the first things that we look at is we build cohorts of customers based on the first products that they purchased from you. And so one of the first things we look at is how many customers buy each product first. So you'll find out which products do your heavy lifting for acquisition. And then we ask the question of customers who buy that product first, how many of them come back to order again? And so we end up creating a conversion rate to second order buy the first products that the customers buy. And that really quickly tells you whether you have some stronger or weaker products that you should be using for acquisition. And then from there, we look at how long customers take to repeat purchase. And so, with seasonal product categories, you can start to see some trends really play out. Are they buying, if it's a ski jacket was the first purchase, how many come back to repeat purchase at the 6, 12, 24, 36-month mark? And so what we want to learn is how long customers come to repeat purchase. Because if it's things like graphic T-shirts, for example, we quite often see that 50% of customers who buy a graphic T-shirt will come back and repeat purchase within the first 30 days. And so knowing how long it takes for them to repeat purchase informs us of when to trigger the next campaign. And then we look at what products they buy next. So people who are acquired on a graphic T-shirt, do they buy a hat next or accessories? What are they purchasing next? And we put that all together and create automations to say, if you come in and buy graphic T-shirt first, we then create you as an audience, send you to the right media channel, email or paid media, at the right time at the 30-day mark, and then we target you with more T-shirts and hats, for example. And so we try and put it all together so that the messages are triggered and personalized and timed. And that's the best way that we've seen to, in a cost-effective way, to improve your conversion rate of one-time buyers to two-time buyers. Because the one thing, the longer you leave it, the harder it becomes to get that second order. So you've got to act quickly with it.
Great. Here's a question around segmentation. I think you addressed some of this already, but what is the data you start with for segmentation? Is it as simple as putting all of the data you have on, say, web customers and searching for trends in zip codes? How would you start with that, given the data we probably already have?
Yeah, the first place I would always start for segmentation is your customers' order data. So orders and products that they've purchased is usually the best. And then, when a customer converts, they create a profile and then you've got some locational information. But I would lean into the customers that have ordered. And I would start really simply with things like gender, if you have it, product by category is a really good segmentation sort. And then the total value of their spend, 3 really good kind of logical starting places for segmentation. Location, unless you've got quite a lot of data, location as a variable, I would rank pretty low in its ability to deliver value. It's often like a nice to have. Oh, cool, we've got lots of customers in that location. Now we might test some geo-targeting to work out whether we get a better yield in that location. But actually, if it's acquisition that you're after, a lot of the time, Facebook's optimized to where the customers are performing better, and feeding them location doesn't make a big difference.
Great. So we have about 4 minutes left before we close. Maybe we can end with this one last question. So there's been a lot of talk recently about engaging my customer along the customer journey. How can Lexer help me with that process? So we have a set of playbooks. So we have everything that we've shown you today fits into a group of playbooks. So we have playbooks for prospecting, acquisition, 1 to 2 time buyers, customer lifetime value growth, cool down triggers and early stage retention, lapsed customer re-engagement. And so what we do is we'll take your data, do the initial analysis, and we'll come back to you with a set of recommendations around what part of the customer lifecycle you should be focusing on, and then what are the tactics and strategies you need to deploy to influence that part of the lifecycle. So we bring strategy in the form of executable playbooks that we can either execute for you or kind of teach you how to do it and let you activate them yourselves. Great. Here's a question. Could we get a sample of a playbook? Yes, we're happy to send you a sample of a playbook. We'll record your email address and get that out to you. I think we can squeeze in one more question in the time allotted. So we are a direct-to-consumer company. Our typical buying cycle from entry to purchase is 6 to 8 months. Typical purchase is $750. Do you have any thoughts on how to decrease the amount of time in this cycle?
Yep, there's a lot. Because your average order value is high, it's why I'm assuming that the consideration cycle to purchase is a long time. And so some activities early on in the cycle that gets the customers or the prospects to declare information about interests and usage scenarios, and not knowing your brand and your products. This is maybe one we could have a chat with outside of the webinar, but getting some information around what their key consideration points are. So I'll give you an example. In those acquisition prospecting campaigns we ran for Spider, and we do this for Black Diamond, in addition to capturing the name, email address, birthday, we also ask some profiling questions around what you're interested in. And so for someone like Black Diamond, it's climbing, trail running, or backcountry skiing. For Spider, it's alpine, backcountry skiing, or it's freestyle skiing. And so if we get some information on the customer about what their interests are, we can then start to put them into different personalization journeys where the content that we message them is all related to their interests. And that improvement in relevancy of messaging often decreases the time down to conversion, because you just get more messages that are on point for the individual that are relevant. And that often has a big impact. But not knowing your brand, I probably want to know a little bit more about what you sell and who your customers are and how we can help you.
Great. Thanks, David. So I see a few more questions trickling in. I think we're coming close to the hour. So we do have your contact information. We will follow up with you individually afterwards if we didn't get a chance to address your question in today's webinar. But we'd just like to close by thanking our friends at Outdoor Retailer for helping us put on today's event. And David, thank you for your insight and for walking us through these 4 examples of how outdoor brands are leveraging Lexer CDP to drive significant results for their business.
Thank you. And for everyone who attended, really appreciate you listening in, and I wish you all the best for the holiday season. Hope it's a big one for you. Great. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.